Hello and good day. I am bringing you one of my favorite people, Marc Peridis. He's known as the Orgasmic Shaman. And as I strive to bring to people who are doing work that is connected to what we're doing here on Ecstatic Self, I think Marc is going to be an awesome person to have a conversation with. So he works with people on their spiritual journeys. He helps them to connect more deeply with themselves. And he does it through a modality very much like us, of embodiment, of being with yourself, of owning all of your parts, your light, your shadow, your desires, your fears, whether they're socially acceptable or taboo, doesn't matter. I've had friends recently go on a retreat with him in Mykonos, which explored the classical idea of the orgy, and he's going to be repeating that coming up. He's got a bunch of in-person workshops on the docket, and I cannot wait to hear some of his wisdom today. So Marc, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is really exciting, and I love what you do. So it's really great to be chatting. Yeah.
The feeling is so mutual, my friend. So I gave you a little introduction, but I don't think I did you justice. Why don't you go ahead and just share about you, your work, anything at all that you think is pertinent?
Thank you very much. That's really kind. So my name is Marc, and I am specializing in kind of three different areas, which are somatic movement therapy, shamanism, and tantra. And all those elements come together in the work that I do. And so like you said, I do retreats, I do one-to-one sessions, I do kind of this work, but the work that I do, I suppose that the best way to kind of pin it down is by saying that it's based on the practices of ancient civilizations. And so when we talk about something like tantra, so if we're talking about tantra, very often, okay, so just saying the word tantra, we can have a million different perceptions for a million different people. Some people will think it's a massage with a happy ending. Some people will say it's cum control, all of this. I hope you don't mind me jumping right into this.
No, please do. This is perfect.
Okay, so I guess what I want to say is that the work that I do really, I think, invites people to expand beyond certain ideas of tantra, perhaps into something that's I think is a little bit more primordial or intrinsic to human nature. When we talk about tantra, we can talk about control techniques, we can talk about massage techniques, massage with a happy ending, breathing techniques, and all of that. And all those things are wonderful, and all those things are important. We talk about slowing down with sex. We talk about eye gazing. All of that is part of what tantra is. But for me, tantra expands much beyond that. It actually expands beyond the ideas of traditional tantra that we know. The tantra we know came about 500 BC. In India, and essentially we kind of brought it to the West as a result of the sexual revolution of the 1960s in California, where we were looking for new ways of doing sexuality, where we're looking for sexual liberation, and all of a sudden this idea that people were using sex for something that would allow us to grow spiritually was epic. It was what we needed at a time where we were so keen and so hungry to come out of a period of sexual condemnation. And so we grabbed on to the sexual element of tantra, but actually tantra expands well beyond that. It expands well beyond that. And sexuality is actually just a part of what tantra is. So for me, what tantra is actually expands well beyond India. It actually expands well beyond those practices that we know. It expands to as far back as 1500 BC in Greece, 2000 BC in Egypt, 40,000 BC in the caves of southwestern France, 40,000 BC all over all over Europe, 40,000 BC in the caves of southwestern France, possibly from artworks, because obviously we don't have any written records or anything to show us anything about that at the time. But if we look at artworks, if we look at statues, at artifacts that are left over from those periods, we can see that practices that are very similar to what we call tantra today were existing in those times. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the approach that I think is available for us as humans. It's an approach that expands much beyond the ideas of the traditional Indian Tantra, the traditional Buddhist Tantra, the traditional Tantra that we tend to grab at in our society. And that's what I think I try to bring with my work. I hope that made sense.
Absolutely, I love it. And this is a conversation I've definitely had on my channel a lot about what is Tantra, what does it mean? Depending on who you ask, you're going to have a very different answer. And so I love this idea of opening it up and seeing the parallels with other cultures, other traditions, going back over the centuries, over the millennia, and seeing how this idea of radical integration, of bringing all parts of yourself to your spiritual work, is not new. It has literally been going on for thousands of years.
Yeah, exactly. And sexuality really, at the end of the day, is a way for us to get to get to know ourselves. And I think that very often in Tantra, we have the idea that having better sex is the finality. It's what we do it for. Like, I want to have more pleasure. I want to have better sex. I want to get to know myself sexually. I want to get to know my partner sexually. And all those are fantastic things. They're wonderful things. And for me, those are side effects of the greater things. And they are tools that are actually stones on the journey to something much greater. For me, sex and sexual energy are about getting to know myself better and about awakening greater power. For me, that's what the original Tantra was about. It was a journey to awakening the greatest power that I could awaken and embodying it in this form, and bringing it into my day-to-day life. So for me, Tantra is not a practice. Tantra is a lifestyle. Tantra is about how I live every day and every moment. Can I be in presence? Can I be in consciousness? Can I be in the truth of who I am? And when something comes up that takes me out of the truth of who I am, what do I do with it? How do I interact with it? How do I come back to my truth from that place? How do I find the oneness that is behind the place where I get out of alignment and the place where I am in full alignment, and know that the source behind that is exactly the same? For me, that's what Tantra is. It's like just that ability to embrace that oneness.
I love that. I think broadening this perspective of we're not just looking for pleasure in sex, but we're looking for pleasure in life. We're looking to have a joyful, spiritually fulfilled, enlightened life. And working with our sexual energy is part of that, but it's about opening up to an ecstatic state, all directions.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if I could say a little bit more about that, the way there are many ways that sexuality is a tool, or is a tool for us. And one of the ways is that sexual energy, and especially orgasmic energy, is the strongest energy that we can access as humans. And so when people say orgasmic shamanism, what people generally think, they think I'm going to give them the best orgasm they've ever had. And maybe I can, but that's not what I'm here to do. That's not what this is about. People are imagining this earth-shattering, mind-blowing, house shaking, kind of thing. And that can happen. It does happen. Ask some of the people who've been to my retreats. However, that's not the orgasm I'm interested in. The orgasm I'm interested in is the one when you stop and smell a rose, and you merge into this moment where all of a sudden, through the scent of that rose, you become one with everything in existence for that moment. And it didn't take an earth-shattering sexual experience. It didn't take, a strong sexual, the complex techniques and all of that. It literally is just the pure presence of being in eros with life. That for me is the orgasm. It's the energetic orgasm. It's the orgasm that's available in every moment in my life. It's living in what I call the eternal orgasm. And I feel like, the path to that is like walking through all of our shit, really. It's to get to the place where every breath we take becomes an orgasm, rather than it be the special occurrence that happens and then we're like, okay, great, can't wait for that to happen again. It's like, no, so some people are surprised, like when they come and do the work I do, they're like, I didn't think this would be so hard. I didn't think we were going to talk about this and that. And it's like, yeah, because I think walking through our darkest shadows, our darkest shit is the path, is part of the path. for us to get to this place, because those patterns, those beliefs, that darkness, those narratives that limit us, they're keeping us from being in that state in which we can be in that orgasm at all moments, at all times, you know?
It's so beautifully articulated. Thank you for sharing that. And, feeling that experience, not just understanding it, but just feeling it as you express yourself is so beautiful. Something I've shared before on this channel is the term turiya. Turiya can be used to describe a state of enlightenment, as connectedness with all things, and it can also be used to describe the state of sexual orgasm. And how interesting it is that historically they've used the same word to describe these two, as we often see it, separate states, but in reality they are very connected.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I didn't know that. And what I find interesting is the idea also of the connection between death and the orgasm. Like for a long time we call the orgasm the little death, the petite mort in French, and and a lot of people out there will say that that's reason for us to not have orgasms. And I actually think that that could be true, but I also think that the opposite is also true, because ancient civilizations like the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Greeks, they believed the orgasm was an act of death that was necessary as a part of the process of our highest spiritual evolution. You had to go through a death to be able to encounter a rebirth that would allow you to be the truth of who you are. So that's kind of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about walking through the shit, meeting our shadows, facing them. That's like the death, after which we reemerge into this space of just presence and being in truth, like being in the truth of who we are, versus stories that limit us. Does that make sense?
Something I'm very connected to right now. I was sharing on this channel that last month I went on a retreat in Peru, a spiritual retreat. And as you said, when you sign up for a retreat, sometimes it's really blissful, sometimes it's really difficult and you're digging through the shadow. And for me was that experience of going through a death, like feeling like I was physically being pulled to the precipice of life, of not being able to survive, hearing voices in my head confronting my weakness, my shadow, these things I didn't want to face. And then on the other side, moving through that, being in this beautiful new open space that's so much better than it was for the year, 2 years, however long previous. But in order to get to that spiritual rebirth and opening, you have to go through the land of shadow. You have to go through that death, but how it leads to something really transformative.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because as we speak of shadows, I really think that if we're speaking of shadows without speaking of sexuality, we're really only speaking, probably like of half the story, because that's another way that sexuality becomes a tool, is that sexuality very often brings up, for many of us, the darkest shame, our darkest shadows, our darkest, sense of guilt and insecurity and lack and scarcity and all of that. And so by exploring the shadows of our sexuality, of our shame, of our deepest fantasies, we can then, unravel that part of ourselves that needs to be unraveled for us to achieve what it is you're talking about. And that is part of the process of death. I just had this retreat in Greece where, these are people that have been working with me for about 2 years, a small group of people. And, we spent about 3.5 days in a complete pitch black room, doing these very intense practices of, somatic work, energy work. Sex was going on, and we really couldn't see what was going on. There was no verbal, no talking, just sound, movement, touch, processing. And there was sex and incredible amounts of pleasure going on, but there was also processing shame and trauma. I mean, you would hear people screaming as they released like the things that they had been holding on for decades. And the screams echoing through the room would like make your skin just all the hairs on your skin just kind of raise up and just kind of go, what is going on? And then you would hear this pleasure going on at the same time. And in that space of darkness, pitch black, that's where this death happens. When we stay long enough in a space that's pitch black, our ideas of who we are begin to dissolve, because our connection, our reliance, and our dependency to the world of form begins to dissolve, because we no longer have this reliance on the idea that things are like this, limited in this form, you know. And so neurological shifts happen, chemical shifts start to happen in our brains, and it really becomes a process of death. And I believe that I believe that that's the tantric process. That's part of the tantric process that takes us to what we're talking about.
And I think that also highlights why it's also so important, just on a much smaller scale every day, to go sit in silence, to go sit in, sensory darkness. Because when we create that space where we're not doing, we're not striving, we're not connecting, we're just being, it allows transformation. It allows for us to become more aware of what's going on within, to go through a death and a rebirth experience. But if we're always being stimulated in the light by devices or people, like, do you create the space for you to go through that transformation process? So I love that you're creating that intentionality of space for prolonged periods of time, which every spiritual tradition has done. They have always said, you need to go on retreat. You need to go into these tense periods of self-work in order to truly evolve. So I love that you're creating space for that.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying, because I think that, what I'm saying can sound so far away, but really, like, one of the first steps, you named it, make space, and put on a blindfold. I mean, take 15 minutes out of your day, put a blindfold on and lie down, and resist the urge of grabbing your phone for that 15 minutes. And you're already doing something. I mean, it's not an intense mystery practice from our ancestors, but you're already starting to go there. And for a lot of people, that's big. 15 minutes off of our phones and with a blindfold on, for a lot of people, that's big. And there's something about that. We live in this time where we're being exposed to an amount of information that is out of order with regards to what our beings were created to be able to handle. When our beings were created, this level of information, of access to information, didn't exist. Like a tiny little screen this big on which there's a million notifications and a million pop-ups and a million little things catching your attention. And the more time we spend on that, the less time we spend in connection to the truth of ourselves, to wholeness. The more time we spend in reliance on what is happening outside of me, being organized by what's happening outside of me, rather than being organized by what's happening within me. And so there's like, like you said, the first step is literally making space, blocking out the time, putting on a blindfold, and literally just going in, for a period of time, and knowing how good that is for us. Because, listen, this is the thing, our world is craving innovation right now. And what I mean by innovation is that we're in a state right now in this world where, we need new ideas, we need new paradigms, new concepts, and people are looking for them, and people are awakening them. And for me, innovation does not come from reading books. It does not come from listening to other spiritual teachers. All those things can be great for inspiration. But where the true innovation comes from is that place where you put your blindfold on and you turn inwards and you look within. And that is where true innovation comes from. Because when you sit there long enough, that's where truths and knowledge and information arise that will never arise in anyone else other than you. And that's what the world needs. That's what the world needs. And, like, one of the things that I talk a lot about in my work is the concept of your erotic essence. And for me, that's what we're talking about. It's like, when I get to know this force that's within me, I'm getting to know my essence. And the word erotic refers to eros as the process of giving life-giving process of things coming into form from the void and dissolving out of form back into the void, into chaos, the source, whatever we want to call it. And so erotic is that, and the essence is that part of me. And what I feel is important about this is to debunk, I mean, again, this might be a very controversial idea. You might edit this out, I don't know. But I have a real problem when people say, oh, that wasn't me, I channeled that. I didn't do that, I channeled that, it came through me. And I know this is something that a lot of people say, and I respect it, but I have a real problem with it because I feel that each and every one of us has a unique access that is unique to us. And it's not just something that we're challenging. We're making the effort to sit. We're making the effort to show up for ourselves. We're making the effort to, to be our truth. And that truth that comes out through us is unique to us. And it's not the same as what would come through someone else over there or over there or over there. And I feel that that's what some of these ancient civilizations knew and they did, was that they spoke about the idea that each and every one of us had that unique essence, that unique snake that would come out and come through and create life in a way that no one else could, you know? And I feel that that's what the world is calling for at the moment.
It reminds me of the classic parable of the five blind men and the elephant, that each of them have come up and grabbed a different part of the elephant, the tail, the ear, the snout, the leg, and they're trying to tell the others, this is what an elephant is. And it sounds totally different from everyone else, but they're all touching the same source. They're all touching the same elephant, but we each have our own unique way of experiencing it, our own unique way of describing it, our own unique way of interacting with it, and they are equally true and wonderfully diverse. And, I think too, as you were speaking of, the traditional term to describe the spiritual traditions of India is not Hinduism, it's Satyana Dharma, eternal truth, that these truths exist deep inside. They are part of you, and that we're not really discovering something new so much as we're rediscovering what is already a part of us. We're rediscovering our own spiritual connection that has always been there, and it's going to be a different shade, it's going to be a different color, it's going to be a different experience than your neighbor, than your son, than your lover. That everybody has a different way of experiencing it, but it's all the same cosmic source.
Yeah, and I really love that. And I think that that's where the true teachings are. For me, the only teachings are the teachings in which the teacher holds a space for you to be who you are, for you to be more the truth of who you are. That sounds like that's what you're speaking to. And for me, when we talk about the truth of who we are, we're talking, that's transformation. Like for me, the only way we can transform is by being more aligned with the truth of who we are. We could either become less aligned with the truth of who we are, or we could become more aligned with the truth of who we are. And that's how we transform. Yeah. And so for me, these practices of connecting to source, of connecting to that oneness, are the places where I engage with that source in a way that I become more truthful, because everything that's not truthful can only fall away in the presence of that process of entrainment that happens energetically, vibrationally, whatever. And then truth can only arise. There's no choice. And that's transformation. That's healing. Healing is a form of transformation. That's how healing happens. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to cure this backache or whatever. That's, short-term stuff. What we're talking about healing is like, deep healing is transformation, and it's getting in touch with our truth. That's what I find deep healing is. And the orgasm and eros, to bring it back to that, they are tools to be in that oneness, in that truth, and it makes sense because they are the life-giving force. The other way that eros and erotic energy and sexual energy are the vehicle for that is that they are the neutral field. They are the neutral frequency. Sexual energy, eros, is neutral in the sense that it's about the uniting of polarities, the masculine, the feminine, dark, light, yin yang, whatever we want to call it. What we're doing with eros is it's a process of merging polarities into a neutral space, and that neutral space is what brings healing and transformation, because essentially healing and transformation is only really something being in polarity, out of balance with itself, in some kind of a division and duality. And so the neutrality really is what brings, and the neutrality of eros is what brings things back into balance.
Beautifully put. I love that. Talking about polarity is one of my very favorite things, and how so maybe we'll dive more into that. I do want to highlight something you just said, which was our transformation is really just about letting go of everything we aren't and becoming more of who we are. It's one of my favorite compliments I ever got from my husband several years ago. He said to me, he's like, "You have changed so much since I met you, but all you've done is become more the person that I already saw inside." Like, as different as you are, you've become so much more familiar to me because all of that bullshit has just fallen away. And I loved that. And I so celebrate that idea.
And you know, the interesting thing is that, and I see this, I mean, you've probably seen this, and I see this with the people I work with, is that we change in those moments and the world changes. The world changes to us. The world around us changes. Everything changes because it's all related. It's all one, you know, and yeah, as that truth unravels and things fall away, everything changes, and it's quite exciting. Yeah.
Love it. Something you talked about a few moments ago, I'd love to circle back to, is just about this idea of modern society and us just functionally not necessarily being built to thrive in it. Something that came to mind for me is a recent study that suggests that people have a finite number of social connections that their brain can maintain. I think the number was like 450, that historically speaking, you would probably never meet or interact with more than a finite number. And now we live in a digital age where you can have 7,000 Facebook friends and connect to hundreds of thousands of people via Instagram. And are we actually able to thrive in this environment? And especially when we're considering the human journey of spiritual connectedness and coming home to yourself and finding alignment, how much do we need to consciously choose to disconnect from some of the aspects of the modern world in order to thrive? Or do we not need to? Is it possible to be on your phone all day, every day, and also be experiencing a state of contentment and enlightenment? What are your thoughts?
I think that's a really, really interesting point you're making. And so for me, it's about, there's this, you know, this saying that I love, which is being in the world and not of it, which is, I think, the gospel of, I don't know, is it the gospel of Thomas or Jesus? I don't know, something like, don't quote me on that, but not good with the Bible. But it's like, be in the world and not of it. You know what I mean? And that's what I think is important when we're talking about this. I would say that, because I don't know about that study about the limits on the connections that you spoke about, but what I feel is that we have created a society that functions and thrives on the idea that we should be disconnected from our truth. And this might sound really harsh, and it might sound like a conspiracy theory. It might sound like I'm being negative about the world, but actually not. I'm just saying, wait, we can awaken this. Like, there's so much possibility. So I believe we've created a society. This society that's around us is without a doubt consumeristic, without a doubt relies on the commodification of ourselves, of our information, of our privacy, of our gifts, our talents that we don't even know we have, because we have never actually, we most of the time don't even sit down long enough to reflect and know what they are. And even when we do start to know what our gifts and talents are, we're taught to so quickly go out and sell them and commodify them and make money with them before even feeling their power. And so we have created a society that thrives on this model of commodification, of speed, of efficiency, of
Capitalism.
Well, it's capitalism, and it's and that thrives on the abandoning of ourselves. Because listen, if we could sit in our natural state as humans, that state that we were talking about, you and I, that state is a state of pure satisfaction. What I'm talking about when I say, you know, smelling a rose and going into oneness with everything in existence, that's pure satisfaction, that's wholeness, that's fulfillment. And that would keep our society, that would, if we were able to live like that, our societies would fall apart. Because who's shopping when you're fulfilled in that way? Who needs to travel? Who needs to stay in codependent relationships? Who needs to stay in a job they hate? You know, if that's how you're living your life. So we have built a model, and it's unconscious. I don't think there are, I mean, maybe there are, but I don't think there are puppet masters at the top. Personally, I don't believe that there are puppet masters at the top going, ooh, let's keep people out of their truth, because, you know, I just believe that it's a model that we've fallen into and that we've perpetuated, and that's comfortable for us, except that it's massively uncomfortable. But the thing is that we need to walk through this layer of discomfort that feels like a death, to walk out of that into a place of truth where everything can be effortless and beautiful and fulfilling and satisfactory.
I love that. I am right with you there. One thing I want to just also highlight is when you start to realize that we are in this consumerist capitalist society, and that, as you beautifully said, if we achieve the state of spiritual work, which is contentment, true deep contentment, no matter what's going on around you, capitalism, consumerism doesn't function well. When you start to look at advertisements, and I think I read a study that said the average person will interact somewhere between 4,000 and 10,000 pieces of advertising every single day, even something as little as like a logo on a t-shirt. But every advertisement basically says, you are not okay, but if you buy my product or my service, then you will be. Whether that's yogurt or a bicycle or a sexual partner or a gym membership, every single piece of advertising says you will be happier if you buy and consume. And so I think you're exactly right that this modality that we live in is not set up for us. It is not set up to find contentment. And that, you know, I'm also a big believer that there's nothing inherently right or wrong, good or bad, that you incarnate into a world and experiences that your soul wants to explore, painful or pleasurable, doesn't matter. And you look at the historical perspective of Tantra and of India, they talk about yugyas or epochs that the world goes through, and that we're in one of the lesser epochs right now, a time where people are more concerned with materialism, are more concerned with basic animalistic things. And that's not necessarily bad. I mean, there's a tremendous opportunity for spiritual growth when things are so hard. But it's what our soul signed up for, that we are here and we are now. And I'm also right with you on not believing in puppet masters that run the show behind the screens, or the lizard people who own everything. And I personally, and just my own opinion, but I personally think that the proliferation of conspiracy theories and this wanting to believe in this master behind the scenes controlling everything comes from a disconnection to God, comes from a disconnection to source. That when you lose this belief that we live for a greater purpose, that there's something out there that's looking out for us, and you truly believe that we're alone in the world, just shuffling about with no purpose, no lasting resonance beyond these 60 years of life or however long you're given, then we want that almost parental sense of comfort of, even if I don't like them, at least there's somebody who's in control. At least there's somebody who is able to manage this world, and it provides a sense of safety.
I think that's really interesting what you say. And, you know, at the end of the day, whether there are these puppet masters or not, really, at the end of the day, in the realm of oneness, anything that's out there is just a reflection of a certain part of myself. And by knowing that, and by exploring that, and by finding a way to merge with that, and to dissolve any kind of density that I have with that, then that's where I'm able to transform. And that's where the world can start to transform around me. So even if there was a group of puppet masters, you know, it's not them and us. It's like they are a reflection of a part of our shadow, and they're here to do a job, and and there's a gift there, if there are, or whatever is out there. You know, we're talking about the Vladimir Putins of the world, or the Donald Trumps of the world, or whatever, you know, whatever forces are out there. When we begin to understand that they're only a reflection of a shadow part of ourselves, or unconscious part of ourselves, and that's the beginning of this journey to wholeness that we're talking about, and the realization that everything is exactly how it should be. Everything is exactly how it should be, you know? And so that comes back to, you asked the question, can we be in the world with this information and still be, I'm not sure if you said enlightened, or I'm not sure exactly what the word that you used, but can we be in presence in this world, you know? And I really think that we can. I don't think we need to deny materialism. I love beautiful things. I mean, I do expensive retreats in Mykonos, for God's sake, and I like having the best caterers and the best chefs and the sea view and the sun setting, you know, and I love that. But I suppose my approach to that, and you know, and I you know, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm excusing materialism, but for me, my approach in that is that I sit and wait to see what arises, and I'm confident that if something wasn't in alignment, it would collapse in front of me. You know, I would try to buy this big expensive thing, and something would come and block the way. The shop would be closed. The last one would be sold before I, you know. So I feel like, you know, like you open up your connection to source, to the divine, to your essence, and everything falls onto your path in a way that it's exactly what you need in that moment for exactly what needs to be. And it could look like a beautiful house in Mykonos where you get to do deep work. It could look like a beautiful meal with your friends, but it could also be just sitting and watching a sunset, you know, in the forest or on the sea or on the mountain or whatever, you know. And so I don't think we need to deny materialism at all. In fact, I think that that would be harmful because we're creating more polarity and division. But it's about sitting with all of that, sitting with social media, sitting with what we buy, you know, the amount of money we make, you know, and just being in consciousness with it. You know, like in the spiritual world, another thing that's really controversial is the idea of making money. You know, the idea of making good money for spiritual work for a lot of people is quite, you know, controversial. And for me, that balance is a place where we can go, well, you know, how I'm here to serve and how will I best serve? You know, and sometimes it takes a certain amount of money for us to be comfortable, to be able to serve and to be able to be here. You know, your books that you publish that help so many people, they need to be printed. They need to be printed on paper that's not going to fall apart. You know, and they need to be printed with ink that's not going to rub off when their hands get a bit sweaty on a hot day. Like you need a certain level of quality, and you need certain resources for things to come to form and to run their course and to be purposeful on this planet, you know. So I think that's the integration. That's the place where we can integrate all of it, and our bodies will show us. You know, what I really want to speak to here is like our sensations are where presence is in our body. You know, since the sensation realm is probably, I think, for me, the most important part of this whole conversation. It's like, you know, the sensations are the place in my body where I get the yeses, where I get the nos that pave the way to what's right, what isn't. And if something's out of alignment, those sensations will tell me. You know, if something's not right, I will know in my body. You know, I will know when there's deep resonance, and I will know when something needs to change. You know, and that's true for everything. So, you know, if you open your Instagram account, you know, it's like tuning into your body and being like, how does my body feel with this right now? You read a post, it's like, what sensations does it bring up for me? Why am I following this person? Does it inspire me or not? Does it nourish me or not? Nourishment is the key. It's like, if it's not nourishing me, remove, get out, unfollow. You know what I mean?
I love that. So for somebody who is not yet willing to let go and move into flow, that they're somebody who, I need to control, I need to believe that if I don't make things happen, the universe will never bring to me what I need. How would somebody like that take the first steps into moving into this space you're describing of trust and letting go and listening to your body and just moving into this softer space?
I think it's a really, really good question. So I think that the first step, naturally for me, the first step is to be aware that we're in the control pattern, and to be aware of that, and to sit with the truth of that. Like, I need control right now. Why do I need control? You know, what do I get out of it? I need safety. I need to know where the next paycheck is coming from. I need to know that I'm loved, that I'm supported, that I'm popular, that that I can be validated. I need to know that. So just the first step is being honest with ourselves about it and not bypassing. and not ignoring, just being like, yeah, I do wish I used Instagram less. I know I'm looking for validation there, as an example. I do know that, yeah, I need to control things. I do know I don't trust. And I think just the awareness of that is already the first step, because awareness is really a magic key, because so many of these patterns that we're talking about are unconscious. And already just by bringing consciousness to them, you're already taking them out of the shadow. You're going, okay, this can become conscious now. I can still do it. I can still go on Instagram just as much. I could still behave in the exact same way, but with awareness, with consciousness that that's what I'm doing and what it is I'm seeking here. And then once I do that, then my next step for me would be to be kind with myself for the fact that I'm in that place. To not be like, oh shit, I wish I was more enlightened, or I wish I was, like this or like that. It's like, no, there are reasons why I'm like this. Things may have happened when I was a child. I might be looking for safety. Some things may have happened that might have made me feel very unsafe in my life. And I need to feel validated now. I need to feel safe. I need to feel like I belong. And it's about really being kind and compassionate with that part of ourselves, that knows that deep part of ourselves that needs that compassion and that love, to be able to start to release the grip of what we're holding on to, what we're gripping to, you know. So for me, those are, for someone who's really caught in thick patterns, for me, those would be the first steps.
I love that. And it reflects back to the theme you were just describing of, it doesn't really matter so much what you do, it's how are you doing it. Like, you can live in a nice house and be a spiritual teacher. You can have a beautiful space, but are you doing it because it brings you joy, because you like having a nice space around you and it invites people into to enjoy it with you? Or are you doing it for self-aggrandizement? Are you doing it so you say, oh, look at me, aren't I successful? The not to cast stones, but like the Joel Osteens of the world with their mega mansions and Lamborghinis. So I love that. So if somebody says, Marc, I'm ready to go on a spiritual journey, I'm ready to connect more deeply with myself and my shadow and my sexiness and all my parts, what are the first steps? How do they begin that journey?
So my feeling is that the first step is to be aware that we're ready to start the journey. And for me, the way I started, well, I mean, God, I don't want to get into that because that's a whole other story. But like the starting point very often for me is to look up or look in, wherever you look, whether you look up at the sky or whether you look into your heart, and just know that you're able to speak to something greater and say, I'm ready. When you say I'm ready, and especially when you say, I'm ready, and it might not look like I am, or you might not think that I am, but God damn it, I am really ready. I'm really ready. When we say I'm ready, when we put that stick in the ground and we say, I am ready, then all we need to do after that is deep listen. All we have to do after that is open our eyes and be in discovery and curiosity in every moment. And it will appear. The stones on the path will appear. I would love to say go on my website and book my workshops, but that's not the answer. Like, the answer is, just sit and like, to be clear with the universe, with yourself, with your heart, with your essence, and say, I am ready. And if you think I'm not, think again, I am ready. Make it clear. Show me the way, show me the signs, show me how I'm going to get there. And I cannot imagine any other scenario than that, where you then get an email, someone forwarding you something they think you might like, or someone talks about a retreat they went on and you go, oh, like, I need that, that's it, that's the answer for me. So for me, the seeking, the like, I've got to find this, well, someone says, well, I'm going to, it's like, no, it's literally just be
Find you.
way, it will find you. It will
Yeah.
absolutely find you.
I actually had an example of that just 3 days ago. I was doing a consultation with somebody, and I shared a not terribly well-known, but very profound for me, Khalil Gibran quote about joy and sorrow. And he's like, that's really meaningful. Would you mind emailing it to me? And I just, for whatever reason, in the course of our conversation, totally forgot. 2 days later, he's like, I was scrolling on Instagram and just a comment that somebody made on someone's post, they wrote this, "Is this the quote that you had read to me?" And I looked over, I was like, yeah, that is the quote. I guess you needed to hear that. I guess the universe needed you to experience that, because it's not a very famous one. It's not one I've seen everywhere. And the fact that 2 days later it showed up in your news feed, it's like the universe needed you to hear this. I also just wanted to highlight and appreciate to you something that you just said that I also really resonate with, that I think when you encounter people who are more genuine or heart-centered spiritual teachers, one of the things you'll often hear them say is, "I'm not the teacher for everyone. I'm not the guide for everyone." You're going to have many guides in your life, and it's about who you resonate with in this moment and who's speaking your language. And so if I'm the right person for you, great. If I can introduce you to somebody or lead you down the path that you need to explore, great. But I have the integrity to respect that we each have our own unique path. We each have our own unique connections. And my job is not to try and convince you that I'm the right one for you.
I love that. And I want to add another layer to that, which is that, one thing that I often do with some of my students and workshop participants or clients or whatever is they come to me with something and I'll say, this might be where I become a hard ass, but it's like, okay, they come to me with something and it's like, well, where's your daily practice? Are you doing your daily practice? Are you getting on the mat? Are you closing your eyes? Are you switching off the phone? Like I get to a point with my clients where it's like I would prefer you didn't come back to me. Like, look inwards. And when you've looked inwards so much and you still feel stuck, then come back to me. But like it'll happen so quickly that people come, and it's fine because it's just who we are. But we're we need help, we need support, we need this and that. But actually, it's like we can find so much of it within ourselves. And I always say to people, like, listen deeply within you, and only when you're done listening, only when you're done with your inner world, when you're done, doing your practices and all of that, if you still feel you need help, if you still feel you need inspiration, then seek the support of someone around you. But when you do find that person, it's like, listen to what your body's saying. Is it a yes or a no? Are you just choosing them because they're the most expensive and prestigious and it's the one your friends are using and that it's the hot thing of the moment, or are you, is your body leaning towards it because your body's saying, this is what I want, like, this is what I need, this is what I'm yearning for, longing for. You know what I mean? And this is another topic. It's like the trendy side of spirituality, where it's like, like the next big thing or the next trend or the next this and the next that or the next, and at the end of the day, it's like, it really is all here, and it's all within. And it's, yeah, again, it's just listening to our bodies, to our sensations, to, a great way to start listening to the body is, by picking up pendulum dowsing, which is, a tool for building intuition. Because what we're talking about when we're talking about listening to our body is our intuition, is building up our intuition. So something like grabbing a dowsing pendulum, go online and look up how to use it and start to just connect to something that's outside of our mind. When you're hungry, get into the sensations of how hunger feels in your body. When you need to go to the bathroom, get into the sensations of what the contraction feels like in your pelvic area. Those are little steps that bring us back, that bring us into the sensorial field in our body. And that's when we can start to open the door for what's a yes, what's a no, what's really, really needed by us. And when we're in that place, we don't even need to ask any more questions about anything. We just follow that,
The greatest teacher is within, as they say.
Yeah.
I love that. One last thing I would love to highlight too is, I remember the first time I encountered you in a social media presence online, I was a little intimidated. I was like, whoa, this guy, he is not afraid of being out there. He is really bold. He's diving into some really taboo stuff. And then, just getting to know you since then and talking with you is just recognizing like how sweet, how beautiful, how kind, how thoughtful you are. And it just reminds me of how, historically speaking, the tantric yogis had always been fearsome to look at. They've always been the ones who society thinks, oh my gosh, they're terrifying. They're covered in ash. They're naked. They're carrying a begging bowl made out of a human skull. Hide your children, run away. They commune with demons in cremation grounds. And then you go meet them and actually realize, like, oh my gosh, they're so beautiful. They're so loving. They're so connected to something really sweet. And, you know, for somebody who, you know, maybe you're watching me and Marc interacting for the first time, maybe you've never watched any of my videos or any of his stuff, you might think, oh my gosh, these are guys who are talking about sex all the time and they're talking about this socially taboo stuff. They must be like crazy. They must be, you know, really controversial. And then you sit down and have this conversation and be like, oh, you're actually little kittens. You're actually really sweet.
Thank you for that. I really, really appreciate that. You know, and I think it's important. You know, I think that you are right. There are some topics that I bring up that are controversial and that are difficult for a lot of people. And you know, it is what it is. Some people need to talk about these things. And I think that that's the place where that's a place where we find truth as well in those places, in those hard places. You know, it's the fire, you know, and yeah, the fires of transformation. Really, that's the way that I see it. It's like, oh, it's burning, you know, it's like that you get close and it's just going to burn you, but it's the fire that brings transformation that I think you're naming, you know.
And the aspect of the tantric path too, that our goal is to see God everywhere. See God in the homeless person, see God in the profane, see God in the beautiful. And that to reach that point where you realize there is nothing that exists that isn't God.
Yeah. You know, it's really interesting what you say, because like a couple of examples of that in the realm that I work in is, you know, one of the practices that I do the most and that I love the most is my practice of exploring shameful sexual fantasies. And I take people through exploring, you know, their fantasies about pedophilia, bestiality, incest, you know, mutilating people when they're having sex or whatever. And I in no way advocate doing any of those things in real life. But if we leave them in the realm of the fantasy realm and we leave it unexplored, then it's only going to cause more harm, you know. And so people hear me talking about these things and they see me talking about these things, and they think, oh my God, you're re-traumatizing. Oh my God, how can you do this? And I'll just say, you know, you're not my people. You know, you're not looking for this. You know, go somewhere else. You know, but what I get the most is people who say, oh my God, like this is what I've been looking for. I've never been able to tell anyone this. I've never been able to show this part of myself to anyone before, you know, and I will never stop that, you know. And I think, you know, another example that I wanted to name is, you know, one of the workshops that I teach is called the Sacred Orgy. And when people see that, they can very easily think, oh, it's just an excuse to have an orgy. Oh, it's just an excuse for, you know, it's an expensive sex experience, you know, for a day with a group of people. And if that's how you want to see it, that's great. But if you actually read the description and if you actually came, what you would find is that we're actually spending the whole day in the process of preparation to be in a space of an orgy, and we might not even get there at the end of the day. And if when we do, we might spend 40 minutes there, but it's actually a process of like being with myself, because the orgy is an example of how am I going to be in oneness with anyone else if I can't be in oneness with myself, you know. And it's like the preparation for that practice is like looking at all the parts of myself that harbor division, that harbor a disconnection from source. When I look at people and I have judgments and ideas and thoughts and this and that and discomfort and all that, so exploring all of that allows me to be more whole or more true. So it's the process. Those 40 minutes we're going to spend in the orgy will do very little for you compared to the entire preparation. Like those temples in India, I can never remember the name of the village. You probably know better than I do.
I don't remember the names either, but the sex temples.
Yeah, exactly. Where they have the Kama Sutra positions and all the statues and all these sex positions. And as I understand it, one of the reasons for having all those sex positions is that to enter the temple, you had to sit in front of each one of those positions and sit with whatever came up for you. And it could be disdain, it could be disgust, it could be lust, whatever it was. And once we were able to find peace with all those emotions, is when we were able to enter the temple. you know? And so that's what it is I'm talking about. Like, we need to be able to sit with all of it to be able to enter the temple.
Mm. You bring to mind two of my favorite quotes, one of which is, anything that is repressed will express itself inappropriately. And then also a much more well-known one, that which you resist persists.
Yeah.
So creating the space for people to finally move into this space, let these things go, explore them in a healthy, safe environment, you know, allows healing, allows transformation in a way that suppression just never does.
And not only that, but I mean, that's a whole other topic, but not only that, but very often our highest gifts are hiding behind that. So we think, I'm going to go down this process and I'm going to get rid of this, or I'm going to transmute that, or I'm finally going to get over that addiction. But actually, no, that's not what this is about, because on the other side of that, that addiction, that fantasy, that piece of shame, that darkness, it holds a piece of intelligence for you. It holds information for you, okay? Because our shadows hold the darkest part of ourselves, and those parts of ourselves are the parts that we hide. But usually the parts that we hide are the parts of ourselves that are the most unique, because they're different from everyone else. And so we think we need to hide them, but their uniqueness is what the world is seeking. And so it becomes this distortion where it turns into pedophilia, bestiality, aggression, whatever. But when you really sit with it, and when you really, and I promise you, it has never failed me to sit with people with this, it always leads to, you know, their greatest gifts, to who they're supposed to be in this world, to how they're supposed to bring themselves forward for the service of others in the highest way and for a more fulfilling life. Every time.
God, I love that. That is so beautiful. Marc Peridis, everybody, such an exceptional person. I'm so glad to get to have you here. Definitely have you back for another conversation whenever you'd like, and hopefully some collaborations in the future. I'd love to get to work with you in person. Thank you for your heart, for your energy, for everything. If people want to get to know you more and more about your work or engage with you, how do they go about doing that?
Yes, thank you very much. They can find me, I'm orgasmicshaman.com and Orgasmic Shaman on Twitter. That's basically the only social media I have, but if you go on orgasmicshaman.com, it's the only one that hasn't booted me off. So if you go on orgasmicshaman.com, you'll find loads of stuff there. There's a vlog with lots of information and things like that. Yeah. So thank you. And I also want to honor you for the work you do. You do such a great job at bringing information to people and bringing it in ways that's interesting and that I think is relatable and impactful. So thank you. And I'm really honored to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Much love. I'll drop his links in the comment in the description below, so please do go ahead and check it out. He does have, I think, 3 retreats coming up, one in Greece, one in Spain, and one in California.
Yeah, there'll be 3 weekend workshops in California in November. There's a retreat course in Greece in October, the first week of October, and a retreat in Spain at the end of August, beginning of September. Yeah.
Great. So if you are so inclined and have the ability, go check it out. Like I said, I've had friends who have gone and did his orgy retreat in June, had such a life-changing and beautiful experience. So happy to vouch for him and say that it will be life-changing. So thank you so much for your time today. Much love to you, and we'll connect soon.
Lots of love to you.